Liberating structures it's not a new thing. It's not even invented in IT. It was Henry and Keith that invented it within, I think it was healthcare, actually, but it just slowly started growing. And then Barry and Christian from the Liberators, they coupled it together with Scrum and how we actually can use liberating structures as a facilitation toolkit to help create more inclusive and diverse workshops, meetings, and it's actually pretty powerful. And once you've done it for some time, once you've used liberating structures for some time, it just gets second nature to you. I don't think about liberating structures. I'm just using them, which is quite nice. One of the models to introduce what liberating structures is, and this is definitely not a scientific proven model or anything, and it's very much open to debate, but just to give you an idea, is this one. So if we have two axes, and in this end of the y-axis, we have many people in control of content. And that meaning, what are we talking about? What are we looking at? What are we working with? And then at the other end, as you might have guessed, one in control of content. One in control of content. Meaning me at the moment. I am very much in control of what we're talking about. The other axis is then who calls the shots. So here it's many shaping actions. So both we have many different leads, but also many different people having a say in what are we doing. And in the other end, as you guessed, it's one shaping actions. And if we're then looking a bit at what is happening at the moment, right now, we're in a Zoom call. I'm talking, I'm presenting. I would very much put a presentation like this down in this corner. So that is what we're doing right now. I'm presentation. I'm talking. I'm deciding what we're looking at. And you just sit there passively and listen. If we're talking about a status report, for instance, that would be something along this point. So it's a bit more interactive, right? We have a bit more people giving a status report, but it's very much still one person setting the direction. If, for instance, we are having a brainstorm, then we still have one topic for the brainstorm, but many people like pitching in with ideas on what could be fun, what could happen, what would we like to dive further into, but it's still rather one way. In general, liberating structures is somewhere over here. And of course, this model is also skewed towards making liberating structures look awesome. But in reality, I actually think that they are. The idea with liberating structures is to get people talking as much as possible, as soon as possible. And we do that through different strategies. And there is, I think, it's 33 official liberating structures and 4 or 5, I think, under development at the moment. Or is it 3? Something along that. And these, they all share some things, but they're also quite different. You can find like different trees of structures. So once you know one structure, for instance, 1, 2 for all, then a lot of other structures follows quite easily afterwards because they're built on the same principles. And that's just like super nice that you don't have to reinvent everything all the time. You can actually go use what you know already, and then with different wordings and stuff like that. All liberating structures, as I said, they share some things, and it's these 5 common traits. All the liberating structures, they have some way of arranging the space. how should people be physically organized? Is it plenum? Is it small groups? Is it 3 people? Is it with a chair? Is it standing? How do we do that? Then it's how do we make an invitation so we are not forcing people to contribute. We are inviting them to contribute. And this, with making an invitation, that's one of the most important things in liberating structures. It is to create a good invitation for collaboration. So when we prepare a session with liberating structures, that is where I spend most of the time. It is to refine the invitation, to make it open enough to give people enough space, but also to be narrow enough, so to say, that we somewhat run in the same direction. And as I previously said, right, what we're trying to do is this distribute participation. So we want to distribute it to the entire crowd, not just 2 or 3, but to the entire crowd at once. So everybody can contribute and it's not just 2 or 3 people running the show. So that is always included in the liberating structure. How do we do that? How do we distribute it to the entire crowd? Whether we are talking a group of 6 or several hundred people, we always distributing participation. Then how do we sequence and allocate time? That's also quite well described. So again, we do not need to reinvent everything. It will say, then we do this for 5 minutes, then we do this for 2 minutes, then we do this for 10 minutes as a suggestion, right? But these timings are actually a pretty good starting point. Then you might want to leave extra minutes for this, or if you're having a huge crowd, then maybe this will take more time. But again, all of this has also been thought about and put in writing, so it's quite easy. And then we often need some kind of groups, and how do we configure these groups? That is also something we do consciously with the liberating structures. Sometimes consciously also just means go find somebody to talk to, or the likes, or be in groups of 3 or being pairs, and so on. So all of this, when we have that in place, then that forms a liberating structure. And when we then start to put several liberating structures together, then we can think of each liberating structure as I'll just take this one instead. A liberating structure like something that takes an input that can, for instance, be how is the space organized at the moment, the participants, and so on. And then it gives some kind of output. That can be maybe a prioritized list of actions we should do, a list of things we should not do, observations from a shared experience, and follow-up actions. And then we can slowly start to string these together for our workshop. Then we continue just to string these structures together, and then at one point we can say, there we go, that is our backbone or our string for our session. When we then plan, whether it's a retrospective or a multi-day workshop, it might be that we are unsure what direction will this take, what topics will come up. Maybe one structure is pretty good if we go in that direction, but it might also be that we go in another direction where another structure would be better. What we then do is when we prepare, just save alternative strings. We don't necessarily need to prepare them that much, but we just need to remember that there is a possibility that this could be a better way of getting the data or the input that we wanted. And these alternative strings, we can have many of them. In general, when I facilitate liberating structures, I don't use PowerPoints or flip charts that much, because a lot of it is just like go with the flow. You will present each step every time so people can just follow through. That also means you have the flexibility in the spur of the moment to change course. It might be that you have an agenda on the wall, but people will probably be okay with, instead of taking something called TRIS, then we do something else instead, because that will hopefully give a better yield. And then we do not need to panic about our PowerPoint being out of date and so on. It's just us as facilitators that need to have that prepared. Some of you in the best hopes also put learn something new. How can I start using these liberating structures? And as I also put in the agenda, the simplest liberating structure, and maybe the one I use the most, is called 1, 2, 4 all. And it is insanely powerful, to be honest. What we do is we start out by making the invitation. For instance, the best hope question I started with, we could have done that as a 1, 2, 4 all. And with this, ask the crowd something, whatever you want them to reflect upon. So for instance, what would make this a great session? Or what would you really like from this team gathering? Or what did you think of that presentation you just saw? Then have people to individually and in silence reflect upon that. And they get around 1 minute to do that. So that's the one in 1, 2 for all. Then we cater for, sorry for the stereotypical language, the introverts that need some time to reflect and digest. Then again, to build up this psychological safety in the group, to make sure that we have people that dares to speak up. Then we ask them to form to form pairs for 2 minutes. And in this pair, the introverts can try to say it out loud. How does the other one resonate with it? And the extroverts can then start again making up their mind by saying it out loud. And then we have a rather safe little discussion in this pair for 2 minutes. And you as a facilitator can then listen to the buzzing of the room. Are people still talking, highly engaged, or is it starting to slow down again? Then maybe it's time then to move on. When we have done that in these pairs for 2 minutes, then we go to a group of 4 for 4 minutes. And then the pairs retell what did they talk about, anything that stood out. And then we end up in plenum for 5 minutes. And there we debrief some of the groups of 4 to hear what was on their mind, or put up stickies or whatever we asked them to produce. And then that way we have divided and engaged everybody to answer this prompt that we gave them. If you are with a completely new group that have not met each other before, then a small tip in the pairs can be to create some kind of icebreaker to figure out who goes first. And that, for instance, can be the person with the most different colors of clothes, or the person that have owned the most fish, or whatever you find of fun things, because then it removes that awkwardness of, do you? No, I know you. Then it's just, okay, I have 1 color on, super, you have 4, then you go first. That might help some people. Again, creating this safe environment where people can speak up. And as I said, these steps are quite trivial, and you can find cards like this that I'm showing to the camera, where all these steps are just outlined with 1 minute and timing, and what do you ask and how do you distribute it. And it's super, super nice and easy to do. And this one works just in a normal meeting, right? If you ask something, then try out 1, 2 for all. If you're doing it online, then maybe consider riffing it, which is changing it, because putting people into breakout rooms with 2 people and then getting that organized so the same pair goes in with another pair might not be the best way. So then maybe do 1, 2 all, or 1, 4 all, or 1, 3 all. Again, you can be creative. But again, having this individual step, and then in a small confined group, and then in plenum. And just to give you some examples of how I've used it. I did a session some time ago for a group of product managers that they had been pulled in from different departments, and they were now to set a team goal. A team purpose. So how can we do this? How can we work together? And it was indeed a diverse group. So some were new to the company, some had been in the company for years, some were just stepping into this role as product manager, some had again been doing product management for years. And they really wanted some kind of concrete actions and first steps they could go out and do to make sure that even though they were different products, that they still had some kind of things that got them or that made them feel that they belonged to the group and not just being randomly put in a department. And once or whenever I'm given a situation like this, then I always not always consciously, but then I start thinking in liberating structures. So how can I do this? How can I help them set this? And I just got a question in the chat with how do we do if it's a hybrid meeting? For this meeting, that was purely on site, but we can get back to the hybrid meeting afterwards. The structure or the string that I made together with another co-facilitator was having non-liberating structures first, so just introduction by the sponsor of the thing. Why are we here? What is it that they were hoping for? Why is this the single most important workshop ever since sliced bread? Then we did the best hopes, as we also started this session with. So what are the best hopes from the participants? What is it that they hope to get from this? And then we as facilitators could use that to both tailor-make our invitations to make them more precise, use their wordings instead of the wording that we had prepared to make it more important for them and also so they felt seen and heard. Then for the icebreaker energizer, again, to get everybody talking about something, we used something called impromptu networking, and it's a liberating structure, and it's really just a fancy word for saying people go out, talk in pairs about this prompt that I'll give you, and when time is up, you go to somebody else and talk to them. And when you do impromptu networking, as I also said in 1, 2, 4, think about tiebreakers. So the person goes first with the biggest shoe size, or the person goes first if you had the longest commute to get to this thing today. Then you also get people to talk about something that's not work related, but super easy to talk about. And then, of course, do not go into political views, people's weight, age, and so on. That's a no-go in this one. Then we went on to something called appreciative interviews. So here we were deliberately trying to build on a positive note. So inviting them to share when did they have an experience where they really thought, I'm really making a difference now as a product manager. I'm really getting everything to work out as I want. And then interview each other in pairs, only asking follow-up questions, non-judging following questions, and then in groups of 4 to share, to retell your partner's story, and so on. I'll get back to that. Then a break, because people need breaks. Then something called Conversation Cafe, which is a great way of doing discussions. Again, we will revisit these in a couple of slides time, but just to give you an overview. Then 15% solutions, because if you recall, they really wanted some concrete first steps, and 15% solutions is an awesome way of doing that. And then a break, and then I love to end with a Troika consulting, which is just amazing. If you haven't tried Troika consulting, that is one of the liberating structures you should try out. So we will end with how we facilitate that. So hopefully it's something that you remember. As I said, there was no need for a technical setup for this session, but we can get back to that if we want to do hybrid meetings. So let's take a closer look at the format and the steps. So when I facilitate, whether it's liberating structures or not, I always have these session rules where I use the Vegas rule. So what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. aka what happens in this session stays in this session, unless we explicitly agree otherwise. And for me as a facilitator, that also binds me of not sharing, oh, by the way, Carsten said this or that. Again, we should create a safe space. And then we go to this appreciative interview. If we think back on the 5 balloons, here we have people in pairs, that is the groups. We have the timings, how do we distribute, when do we do the invitation, and so on. So we set the theme, introducing what is it that we're going to do, and think back, when did it really make sense for you as a product manager, and so on. And then give people some, once I'm done explaining, please individually and in silence reflect upon when did you really feel that you got the ball rolling as a product manager. Then they interview each other for 10 minutes. Then in groups of 4, they retell your partner story, because then you can listen to what did they pay attention to, what stood out to them. That will also, if you reflect a bit upon it, how is it that I'm communicating? What is it that people pick up when I talk? And then you can hear it from the other ones. And then you you end this with collecting insights and patterns. So what were the similarities of these 4 stories? And then we put it on Post-its and put it up on a flip chart on the wall to have it for later use. And the idea with this was not to have everything concrete and steps, but just like, what are the commonalities here, if any? Some people brought stories from their current role, some people brought stories from their former company. So just like, what are the patterns of when we perceive ourselves as successful? And from there, we go to this conversation cafe, which is an awesome way of doing these bigger group discussions in a format that works pretty well. First off, individually and in silence, reflect upon this. So what we said here was, so now we have all these insights, all these patterns. If you look at these, all of these, not just the one from your small group, but all of these, what stood out to you? The group that we were facilitating for were, I think it was 10, 11 people. And Conversation Cafe in general, they recommend up to 9 people. But again, we just did it as one big cafe because that it would work out. We had time for it. And then when people have reflected individually and in silence, the first round is everybody get up to 1 minute of uninterrupted speaking time. If somebody tries to interrupt or ask questions, I will stop them. I did not have a Nerf gun, but I've sometimes threatened to bring a Nerf gun in this. But again, then people have had time to individually reflect, and then they have time, non-interrupted speaking time, to go through what they said, and then next up. And then when everybody have had their 1 minute, you can give comments or feedback or reflections on what you just heard, not questions, just reflections. Again, up to 1 minute, uninterrupted speaking time, and it's okay to say, I'll pass. And then in the third round, we do an open discussion. And in this open discussion, I also tend to say that it's up to you if you want to use a talking token. If you go for not having a talking token, I will, as a facilitator, remain the right to introduce it if I see somebody dominating and taking all airtime, or somebody hiding. Then I will introduce it, and that tends to get people to behave and actually give space for everybody to pitch in with the views. And when we have then done this open discussion, people tend to converge in some direction, right? Whether it's setting a team goal on this context, what should the purpose for us as a team be? Then we go and ask, so what are your biggest takeaways from this discussion? What is it that when you leave this room that you will bring with you? And then we collected that on sticky notes. And then we had something we could use for the initial phrasing of the team purpose. And with these different stickies and these different views on what would the team purpose, what could it be, then we simply did some dot voting. So where do we see the biggest energy around, and then we said, okay, so if we go with that, then let's go to the next structure, which is 15% solutions. And in 15% solutions, we ask, so with the input we just uncovered, what 15% solutions seems promising? And a 15% solution is something that you can go out and do tomorrow without needing to work overtime, without needing extra money or extra resources or people or whatever, but it's something that you can do. So 85% of our work is fixed, but we have 15% where we can do other stuff. So what would a good first step for you be? That again puts it a positive spin on what can I go out and change to bring us closer to that team purpose tomorrow. And that is quite nice. Then when we have that list, then everybody have their own personal step they can go out and do. And this doesn't take that long, because what you do is everybody makes a list alone for 5 minutes, and then a bit again build on 1, 2, 4. Then we do this with small groups, so we consolidate the list. So, oh, you put this or that. Oh, that was also a great idea. And then we start to build up a bigger list, and then we present it for the rest of the group. And then all of a sudden, we had a list of pretty good first steps that we could go out and action. Some of it would be by the person themselves. Some of it were also, oh, this would actually be nice if Carsten could do this. But of course, we couldn't force Carsten to do it, but just again, it could be good steps towards achieving this team purpose. So that gave us the team purpose, the first steps, and then also some rather concrete first steps. So how do we make sure that it lives after this session? And that's where the last structure, Troika Consulting, come into play. In Troika Consulting, we ask people to form groups of 3 and then sit like this. And then the first step is as the client, the first step is to appoint somebody to be the client. So one person brings, in this case, either their 15% solution or something else that they would really like to get some input on. And then they present their problem, the thing they would like to get some sparring on for 1 to 2 minutes. It doesn't need to take long. And once you have done that, once you have presented this issue, then you as a client, you turn the back to the 2 consultants. Sorry. I'm just getting ahead of myself. 2, you actually, the consultant can ask clarifying questions. Sorry, I forgot that. And consultants. So they can ask non-judging clarifying questions. When you say this, can you just put a few more words to that? Nothing more than that. And that's, again, 1 to 2 minutes, nothing more. This should not be diving into specific solutions, only clarifying questions. And then the client turns around and tries to make the best impression of a statue. So when you're sitting with your back to the consultants, the client just listens in, take notes, and shouldn't try to use the shoulders to say if something is good or not, or shake the head. Just sit there and just listen in. What are they saying? What stands out to you? And then the client take notes. And that means the consultants can now consult on this issue, and they do that for 4 to 5 minutes. Again, it can also be longer, but it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to be that long. And the interesting thing you learn here is, even though that the consultants are not subject matter experts, they are actually able to provide pretty awesome feedback and input to the client and his or her problem. When these 4 or 5 minutes have gone, the client returns and then replays. What are they taking from this session? What are they taking and bringing back to their everyday life? And once you try Troika Consulting, it's mind-blowing how well it works. even with people from different departments or the same department. And if you meet people that then say, I didn't get any, they talked about something completely different, then you can help them realize again, maybe it's the way you phrase the problem. Maybe it's you're not saying what you think you're saying. So that can also be an eye-opener to people, that they're not communicating as clearly as they thought, or using maybe just the right words to get it through the wire. So that was one example string in a lot of details. That is this string you can see here. So this is the agenda from the actual session I did. So I always do a Kanban board-ish style like this. Another session is this from a 2-day workshop. So you can see here we started with best hopes. Then we did something called Mad Tea. I will always call it Mad Tea Party, which is another energizing thing where you can have pretty big crowd talk about a specific topic. They stand in 2 circles and then have a partner. I've done this with a couple of 100 people at once. It get loud but fun. Then we did some voting and some scales, which was not liberating structures. Then product fair. Think of a classic science fair, and then in liberating structures, it's called shift and share, where you have stations that people walk around and then get inputs from different projects or different corners of the organization or whatever these science stands are about. Then appreciative interviews, and then a really nice structure called What So, What Now What, where you can debrief. So what happened? What did we observe? Why is that important to me? And then what can we do? And then on the second day, we did some panarchy, which is life cycles. What are we spending effort on? For instance, on the individual, on the team, on the organizational level, or other levels like that. Then we debriefed that. Then we did a Troika consulting, and then we revisited the best hopes, and then some closing. We also have another one here where we did use the MAT is one of the structures in development, and the same with back-to-back listening, where we are training empathy. And then we did best hopes. Then we did something called drawing together, where you, using only 5 shapes, are trying to depict rather complex problems. And if you phrase it in a good way, if you make good invitations, this can be super powerful. I've also done it with engineers, and they find it a bit more challenging than other people. Then crowdsourcing, 25-10 crowdsourcing, where you generate, again, a prioritized list of things we can do, but without dot voting, so minimizing this bias when dots start to be put on the wall. Open space, I guess many of you know that is also in the Liberating Structures toolbox. And then we have this last session here, which is on trust. Mad Love is the Mad T, but then using the 36 questions to fall in love. Then Tris is a nice exercise where what would be the worst possible outcome? Have people brainstorm on that in 1, 2 for all style, and then asking the kicker. So if we're completely and brutally honest on this list, what are we actually doing? That can be tough. Then building empathy with heard, seen, respected, which is an exercise in where people need to listen actively and share a story of when they did not feel heard, did not feel seen, or did not feel respected. That can really give some powerful learnings and really help bond a team together. And then 15% solution based on the TRIS and the heard, seen, respected. And then we closed that session. And just before we run completely out of time, as I said, this part about making an invitation is by far the most important thing. And when you do the invitation, I really like to mix it with something called solution-focused coaching. Solution-focused coaching is where we focus on signs of improvement. So how would you know this has become better? How would your boss know, your significant other, the team, how would they know that this have improved? And if you don't know solution-focused coaching, I would really like you to invite you to look into it. I have made videos on it. It's also called brief coaching or brief therapy. But it's a nice way, and especially the scaling question or the miracle question is nice. Google it. I have videos on it, and you can also find other ways of it. And for instance, if we're setting a team goal, we can use Conversation Cafe and then ask the question. So let's just imagine that we have actually met this team goal. How would you know as a team when you get into the office? How would you know that this team goal has been achieved? How would the other teams know? How would your boss know? How would the users know that this team goal has been achieved? And then we start to have these signs, which are not actions, but signs of improvement. And with these signs of improvement, then we can start to make actions of those, getting it into, okay, so for this to change, then this could be a good first step, and then so on, which is why I really like this way of asking questions. So my closing remarks is not just an empty slide. When you're diving into liberating structures, I would really urge you to try them out, because they are not that difficult, but they're pretty sure to work really well. There is their website, liberatingstructures.com. I'm not a big fan of the descriptions there. They're quite lengthy and they're a bit difficult to figure out how should I do it. So I would recommend you to search for the Liberators. That is Barry and Christian. They have made some awesome Medium articles on how do they facilitate sprint review, for instance. How do we facilitate that, where they use liberating structures, and you can find their invitations, you can find their steps of making this. And that's really, really well made. You can also go on YouTube, and then you can find, I have made a playlist with all my liberating structures videos. I have almost made a video for all of them. I think I'm missing 3 or 4 structures, but I'm per principle not making a video of a structure I have not tried out in life. So in these videos, you can also find how would I facilitate them. I might have changed styles since I recorded the videos, but still it will give you an idea. And there's both a playlist for the individual liberating structures, and there's also a playlist of some of the structures behind it with the invitations and these principles and so on. You can also go out and buy these cards like this. I think these are the only ones you can buy. There's also a project on GitHub where you can just print playing cards like that and then use them when you prepare. So when I prepare, I use these cards and put them on the desk and string them together, like this structure follows this and so on. That helps me because that's the way I think. That helps me quite a lot. There's also the last one, which is the Lisa app, or the Liberating Structures app, which is quite nice. Again, it contains all the timings and in a more easy to read format. And then really just try them out and start simply. Try out the 1, 2 for all, for instance. And that will, once you have tried that, that will give you a lot of the other structures, give you the feeling of how do we actually do this? How do we link them together? And what are the mechanics in this?